The film Wounds is directed by Babak Anvari, an Iranian filmmaker. He directed a film that came out in 2016. I think it's called Under the Shadow. And I believe Mark Kermode did say it was one of his favorite horror movies. No, sorry, it was one of his favorite films of that year. So I kind of want to check that movie out after seeing that quote. I'll take Mark Kermode's word for it. He knows horror. And it stars Armie Hammer and Dakota Johnson and Zazie Beetz from Deadpool. She was in Deadpool 2. She played Domino, and she was recently in the Joker movie. She was really good in that, despite her role being a little bit brief. And Armie Hammer plays a bartender of a bar in New Orleans. And Zazie Beetz plays a regular there, and she goes there with her boyfriend. And you can see that Armie Hammer is really into her, he's really into her character and has a crush on her while being in a relationship with Dakota Johnson. And in the beginning of the movie, while they're there, a regular who is basically the Barney Gumble of the bar, he gets into a fight, and during the fight, there are these four young college kids who are filming it. And it turns really brutal. The guy Eric, the character Eric, gets a bottle in the face, really kind of disgusting. And during the fight, there's a scuffle. People are thrown around. And during the fight, one of the kids drops their phone, and then Armie Hammer picks it up. And then when Armie Hammer takes it home and starts texting with some of the people, like, "Hey, I got your phone. Stop fucking around," that kind of stuff. Some really weird shit happens to him, and he basically starts to lose his insanity. I went into this film with really no expectations. I had read a little bit about the film, seen the trailer. It looked really interesting, visually very interesting, and the movie visually is really good. It's very well filmed. The direction is pretty good in regards to the way that the movie is shot, and the sound design and the music and everything is really nice. It has a really good atmosphere, and it's really tense in a lot of places. You're not really quite sure what's going to happen. And I think with this movie, Babak Anvari was trying to do a less conventional horror movie that we're used to these days, in that one that doesn't rely too much on jump scares, which I really liked, that he didn't have stuff popping out of the screen every so often, or someone's walking down a corridor and he doesn't see something, and then someone comes out of nowhere and it's like, "Hey," and then the guy goes, "Oh my god, please don't do that." Because if it's done right, I like it, but if it's just one after the other, then it just gets really dull and pretentious and boring and not as creative. So I really appreciate him trying to do something a little bit different with this movie, and the performances are really good. Armie Hammer is a good actor. He's a really, really great actor. I don't think he's gotten that. I mean, apart from Call Me by Your Name, which he's fantastic in, him and Timothée Chalamet, both those guys are fantastic in that film. I don't think he's gotten that role that really propelled him as of yet. I think he just needs that one movie that really that makes everyone feel yeah, Armie Hammer, he's gonna get an Oscar for that movie, and he's not gonna get an Oscar for this movie, but he does very well with the material that he's given. And I mean, all the actors do a fine job. Dakota Johnson is given a very thankless role, and it's kind of sad because she is actually quite good. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of her role in Suspiria. I mean, I had some issues with that movie in general, but I felt like she is an actress with a great screen presence, and it would be, it feels like there is, I'm sure there's some roles out there for her that would, give her something, give her something to do. And in this film, there really isn't, in the writing, there really wasn't much there, including for Zazie Beetz, who also has she has great screen presence as well. And yeah, I think this movie, it lets down some actors, and I mean, it lets down quite a lot of the actors in this movie, because I felt like there was something that this movie was trying. It was building up to something, but by the end of the movie, you're not really sure what it was. And you're not really sure what the movie was trying to do or say, or have some message to it or something. I think it was really there was some sort of payoff, but it didn't really feel like it comes right at the end, and then you're like, "Oh, it's over? What the fuck happened? What was all that about?" And that kind of sucks. So it felt a little bit lifeless, and I feel like there needed to be, more there instead of just Armie Hammer going around and, being a dick, because his character in the movie is extremely unlikable, which I wasn't really a fan of. Like, I mean, I understand because there's a lot of stuff going on in his head and all this sort of weird shit that happens to him and affects his psyche, but I think there needed to be something there so people could really be sympathetic with his character and be a little bit more on board with him, because you don't really care by the end of the movie when, when bad stuff happens to him, because it's like, oh, he's a fucking dick. Who cares about him? And yeah, I feel like the writing and the characterization, and also in regards to the story and what the movie was really trying to be about, there needed to be more there. And apart from some really nice direction and some nice visual moments and a few little tense scares and stuff, like there were some really kind of like cool scary moments, stuff that's really like, oh, I liked that. I hope there's more of that later in the movie. But yeah, it just really it didn't really build up to anything that felt really substantial. And that was kind of a shame. And the movie has like a really good hook, like the whole thing in the bar when the kids are filming these two guys having a fight, and it gets really violent, and then they drop the phone, and then all this weird stuff happens to Armie Hammer once he gets the phone and starts looking through it and starts calling and texting all these things. And it would have been interesting to know a little bit more about the college kids, like to see more of them in the movie and what exactly they were trying to doing. And it hints at what they were doing, and it shows a little bit detail of what they were doing and what was happening. But I felt like there needed to be a little bit more there, because I feel you're just there thinking like, what is it exactly is happening? Like, what is this, a demonic possession movie? Is this supposed to be like, what is exactly that? What kind of horror film is this supposed to be? Yeah, I feel like the storyline wasn't as inspired as it could have been, which is kind of a shame. I felt like what was there in the script and the story didn't really, it didn't help give anything for the actors or the film, and it kind of it failed in a lot of sense, which is kind of a shame, because it did start off really well, but by the end you're just feeling really cold towards it, and not as interested as you was when it in that first scene when some really bad shit happens, and then you're just kind of being like, when's the movie over? That kind of thing, like looking at your watch. Like for an hour and a half movie, it feels longer than it should have been. I think the pacing needed to be a little bit more, it needed to be quicker, and it needed to just get to some things quicker, because it feels like the whole movie was just a very long, like just really dragged out moments where it just meanders back and forth with a lot of different things, where you're just not really feeling much care for the characters or feeling empathetic towards them. And then it just really kicks off in that, fuck, I failed on the click. It really clicks off at the end. But by the end, you're just like, okay, but what happened? kind of thing. So yeah, it's a little bit of a shame the movie didn't exactly hit all the right buttons for me, and I don't think it really hit the right buttons for a few people or critics or anything like that. I mean, it has some effective moments, and some of the performances are good, despite the fact that they're not really given that much to do, and also because Armie Hammer isn't really given a sympathetic and likable character to play to have the audience feel, interest in seeing where he goes in the journey throughout the film. But yeah, I don't think it should hinder the director in his next film. I feel like there is like a really strong craft from Babak Anvari, and I would like to check out his other film, Under the Shadow, because I think that movie made Armie Hammer really take interest in wanting to be involved with this film. And I'm not saying it's the worst movie I've ever seen. There's plenty of films that you look at some films where like you could just feel like there's not a lot of love and dedication towards the craft or towards the storyline, or just giving something that has meaning or feels like substantial or anything like that. And I feel like the people behind this movie really did put a lot of care into making this film feel different than a lot of other horror films that come out, more conventional horror films, more like films like The Conjuring or It or something like that. that rely sometimes a bit too much on jump scares. And I think they were trying to do something very different with this movie, make it more atmospheric, make it a bit more gloomy and more eerie and, you know, mysterious. But yeah, the script fell apart and kind of failed to give something to that film, which is sad. Just lacked that little bit of something to make it feel very memorable, and that and something there to really keep the audience engaged and intrigued with what's going on, because that makes for a good piece of horror cinema.